a very critical level is being tested in the Great British Pound US dollar pair. So first off, read this disclaimer carefully and do your good deed of the day by liking and subscribing. So let's first look a bit at what more broadly is happening to the markets, because the interesting thing is that the Federal Reserve, they are signaling that they think the economy is improving. They have not become like very aggressive about reverting to the normal yet, but there's something afoot. Interestingly, we see that there are countries that are more aggressively going to increase the interest rates. So there's this saying, that don't fight the Fed, which is, there's something to that, but there's also something to this very important fact that the central banks, they fight each other and they can do that successfully. So there's big things happening. So here are the megatrends. We do see that there still is a very, very substantial outperformance vis-a-vis the S&P 500. So let's just jump into the Forex in question. So here it is. We have a 14% move here from the low, a 2% pullback from the highs. So this is the Giga picture, and what I did find interesting are these very substantial time cycles. So these are gargantuan, time cycles that last, so each of these major, super time cycles, they last, 2,828 days. So the giga picture. But there is something to it, a relatively nice rhythm here, a nice rhythm here, a nice rhythm here, suggesting that there is a real possibility that we are towards, we are clearly, judging by the time cycle, we are towards period of substantial deterioration heading towards late into 2024. But there is a caveat, because this is a declining time cycle while we are at a very low historical level. So given that we have already seen such a major pullback from the highs we made here in 2007, that could limit the downside, even though from a time cycle perspective there is downward pressure. Another key thing to look at relating to the time cycle is that when you look at, in this instance, when we saw that deterioration as part of that time cycle, we did have high RSI and also had the same PPO that we have now. We actually have a bit of a higher PPO now, but it's similar. During this time cycle, we had much higher PPO. This was also the biggest move of them all. You could argue that we have a monstrous, absolutely monstrous head and shoulders pattern, gargantuan shoulder, monster head, and you could certainly make the case that this is a right shoulder. So if this is a monster head and shoulders pattern, then we could certainly expect a significant downside, if that pattern is going to play out in a textbook fashion. It is very important to be aware that, technical analysis, it is valuable, but there are limits to it, okay? Behind the chart are, political decisions, economic decisions, cultural, business, you name it. That is happening behind the charts. So even though we do have that head and shoulders pattern, it will not play out, in that textbook, we will see a major pullback fashion, unless we have things happening behind the charts that will corroborate that development, okay? But we do clearly have some signals, technically here, that are long-term bearish. But if we zoom in a bit, because there's been, waves in the shorter time frame, up, down. So I have highlighted the times where price very strongly interacted with the purple 20-week moving average. Pink shows when it was resistance, blue shows when it was support. And so the blue shows that there's been many times where buying that support worked out well for the bulls. We are currently testing that moving average right here and right now. The RSI, we did, pull back from a high reading. Hence, this isn't, you need to, to view the pullback in context. And when you pull back from a high RSI, that's very different from pulling back when the RSI is not, overextended. And the PPO was also overextended. So hence, this pullback, it was very expected. So far, it seems like the bulls are showing up. If we jump here to the daily data points, we see that in this instance, we have the blue 100-day moving average. Rather surgical support, goodbye opportunity, goodbye, goodbye. Given the history of that moving average, the odds favor that this temporarily is a good buying opportunity. It's a bullish trade. However, if we were to lose that moving average, which effectively is the purple 20-week moving average on the weekly data points, and it turns into resistance, then the possibility of a good bearish trade developing is increased significantly. So the good news basically is that we have a technical setup that favors good trading. At this very point in time, the shorter term picture is that this is a bullish setup. The seasonality data for this currency pair has been remarkably consistent. So here we have the last 5 years, and if you look at the columns here, you see that it's very similar. The bars, they follow the pattern. It's almost unchanged. Even if we go further back, there's a similar trend. And as far as the current month goes, June, it is one of the strongest months. And that has been consistent over a very long period. That certainly corroborates the odds that this will turn into a bullish support. July and August are, however, weaker. And we did have that gargantuan giga picture where the current move, even though it is to the upside, it is happening at a time where we do expect that declining part of the time cycle to start to develop. However, given that we are at this very low historical level in this currency pair, the downside could be limited, even though we do have a monstrous head and shoulders pattern. So yeah, this is a very interesting currency pair. The great British Empire was the big empire, not that far back. But after the 2 world wars, it just coincidentally, and it wasn't a coincidence, but anyway, America just happened to become, that the new empire. So these are 2 empires represented by, well, one prior empire and the current empire represented by 2 different currencies. So, one of the things that could be a bit of a plot twist when it comes to Europe, that's actually when it comes to immigration, because there's a very large part, and there's a lot of people who currently live in Europe who originate from Africa, Middle East, and if there were to become peace in the countries they come from and they re-migrate, guess which territory they're going to have an affinity to? Well, that would be Europe. So there could actually be a very interesting plot twist where, Europe, which already has a lot of legitimacy for people around the world, people want to come to Europe, so people do like the European system. So there could be something happening here where you see actually a resurgence in Europe as a cultural and political juggernaut, like it was in the past, but in a very different manifestation. So it will manifest itself very differently. But I think there's something there that could become very interesting, long term, very long term.